Picture this. It's July 22nd, 1971, Washington State University. The summer night is just stagnant, heavy with that oppressive July heat that makes it hard to even breathe.
Oh, yeah, the kind of heat where everything just feels totally still.
Exactly. And inside Stevens Hall, this historic brick dormitory, the linoleum quarters are quiet. But that quiet is entirely deceptive. Because sometime during the dark hours of that night, a vibrant 21-year-old student named Joyce LePage just vanishes into thin air.
And she really wasn't the type to just walk away from her life either. I mean, she was an adventurer, a licensed pilot, a skydiver. She really leaned into life with everything she had.
Right, but she disappears without leaving a single trace. And then, investigators discover this one detail that shifts this from a standard missing person case into an absolute nightmare. That exact same night, a massive swath of heavy green carpet from inside Stevens Hall is deliberately cut out and stolen.
Which is just, well, it's wild. You don't meticulously cut a huge section of commercial carpet out of a building unless you were attempting to conceal something catastrophic.
Right, exactly.
That kind of physical removal points directly to a high-volume crime scene. The perpetrator is clearly trying to erase forensic reality.
So today, we are taking you with us on a descent into a 55-year-old cold case. Scattered across the table between us is this mountain of original 1971 investigation files.
Yeah, brittle, yellowed police reports, those faded carbon copy witness statements.
And the polygraph charts where you can literally see the ink jumping off the baseline, plus some incredibly haunting handwritten letters.
These letters are really something else.
They really are. So our mission for this deep dive into the case files is to sift through the three most chilling theories surrounding Joyce's unsolved murder. We're going to untangle this web of bizarre suspects and see if we can finally connect the dots that investigators missed half a century ago.
Because when you're looking at archival documents, physical anomalies, like a missing square of green carpet, can actually become distractions. They create investigative tunnel vision.
Oh, interesting. So we shouldn't just focus on the carpet?
Right. The physical evidence only tells half the story. In cold cases, the actionable clues are almost always hidden in the psychology of the people the victim interacted with during their final days.
Well, the most logical place to start is where the physical evidence first settled. A little over a week after Joyce vanished, police located her abandoned car.
Right, on Opal Street.
Yeah, it was parked just maybe 3 or 4 houses down from a residence at 400 Howard Street.
And 400 Howard Street served as the local hub for SIMS, the Student International Meditation Society. Joyce was heavily invested in this group.
Super invested.
Yeah, she practiced transcendental meditation daily and had just returned from an intensive week-long course in Spokane. The residents of that house were Mike and Celeste Lindbergh, who led the local chapter, and their roommate, Mark Wadley.
And Joyce was actually planning to move into that exact house for the fall semester. Mike and Celeste were heading to Spain, Mark needed someone to cover the rent, and Joyce was desperate to escape a really toxic living situation at her own apartment.
She needed a way out, basically.
Right, so her abandoned car is sitting 100 feet from their front door. The police logically knock on 400 Howard Street. And reading this original patrol report, the behavioral red flags start immediately.
Oh, absolutely. Mark Wadley answers the door.
Yeah, and he admits he knows Joyce, acknowledges seeing her car parked down the street, but claims absolute ignorance about her disappearance.
He instantly starts downplaying their relationship, telling the officer they only met a month ago and never dated.
But the responding officer actually typed a note at the bottom of the page stating Mark was sweating profusely and appeared visibly shaken by routine questions.
And the whole interaction just escalates from suspicious to theatrical.
Oh my gosh, yes. Tell them about Mike.
So while the police are questioning Mark on the porch, his housemate, Mike Lindbergh, slowly drives past the house.
Just creeping on by.
Yeah, instead of pulling into his own driveway to see why law enforcement is at his home, Mike just keeps driving.
Which is so sketchy.
The officers actually set up covert surveillance after they left the porch, and they documented that Mike only returned to the house after he believed the police were gone.
Why would you avoid the cops at your own house unless you have something to hide?
Exactly. Evading law enforcement at your own residence suggests a severe spike in cognitive load. He needed time to process the threat and likely coordinate a narrative before facing questioning.
And you can see that cognitive load completely visible when both men are brought in for polygraphs. Looking at the examiner's notes here, Mike takes his test first.
And the examiner concludes Mike wasn't directly involved in the physical abduction, but notes he is a nervous wreck.
Right, his physiological arousal, his heart rate and respiration just spikes violently on one specific question.
Yeah, the question was, do you think Mark is involved?
And the underlying science of a polygraph isn't even about detecting a lie, right? It measures the nervous system's response to psychological stress.
Exactly. And when Mike was pressed by the examiner about that specific spike regarding Mark, Mike offered a highly evasive rationalization.
He literally said, maybe I am holding back because I feel a certain responsibility towards Joyce.
But then he completely refused to elaborate on what that responsibility even was.
Maddening. But Mark's polygraph presents a totally different yet equally alarming psychological profile.
Yeah, Mark presented with a flattened affect. He was remarkably calm on the surface, yet his internal physiological markers betrayed him twice.
Wait, on which questions?
His heart rate spiked significantly when asked if he knew whether Joyce was still alive, and it spiked again when asked if he had been inside her car on July 23rd.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because tucked away in the back of these files, ignored for decades, is a letter Joyce wrote to her boyfriend, David Arthur.
Found folded up in her purse back at Stevens Hall, right?
Yes. I'm looking at a scan of the original right now. Her cursive is frantic, heavily slanted, and incredibly difficult to decipher.
It requires real effort to read, which might explain why 1971 investigators just glossed over its implications.
But the structure of that letter is a fascinating study in psychological compartmentalization. She starts by describing a perfectly mundane evening, which makes the sudden shift in subject matter incredibly jarring.
Right. She writes about having dinner with Mike, Celeste, and Mark.
She details driving around, visiting a rummage sale, getting ice cream cones. She explicitly writes, "We had a very good time."
And then in the very next sentence, the tone violently shifts.
She drops a bomb. She writes, "I discovered that Mark once stayed at a mental institution for trying to strangle people."
Wait, strangle people, just right after talking about ice cream.
Yes, and she follows it up by saying, he also, I suspect, was the informer to a narc for this big drug bust 2 years ago.
Placing a casual mention of institutionalization for strangulation next to a description of getting ice cream highlights how normalized the danger had become in her environment.
It's terrifying.
And the fact that investigators in 1971 completely failed to follow up on this allegation of strangulation is a staggering oversight.
Absolutely. And the second allegation, that Mark was a confidential informant, provides crucial historical context for the early 1970s.
The war on drugs was rapidly escalating. Confidential informants were protected assets.
So if Mark was feeding information to narcotics officers, it introduces this very real mechanism of institutional protection. Local police might have looked the other way to protect their drug intelligence pipeline.
So if you are listening to this and screaming, why didn't the police press the known informant? You have to view this through the lens of 1971 policing priorities.
Drug busts made careers. Fissing hippie college students often did not. And Joyce knew she was holding dangerous intelligence.
We have a faded witness statement here from an old roommate named Kay Garrison.
Yeah, Kay ran into Joyce on campus shortly before the disappearance. And she noted Joyce had lost a severe amount of weight, looked pale, and was visibly terrified.
Kay's testimony is vital for establishing Joyce's state of mind. When asked what was wrong, Joyce confessed she was afraid she was going to reveal something she shouldn't.
She used a very specific fatalistic phrase. She said she was terrified she was, quote, sealing someone's coffin.
Such a dark thing to say. And when Kay tried to pry further, Joyce deflected, claiming she understood her chemistry class too well, and that she was afraid she was going to hurt somebody with that knowledge.
It's like she's walking on a frozen lake where she can hear the ice cracking under her feet, you know? She is carrying the crushing weight of the meditation group's drug secrets, Mark's violent history, whatever else is happening at that house.
The stress fractures are visible to everyone she talks to.
Exactly. Eventually, the ice has to break. And when she says she knows chemistry too well, the context is everything. The meditation group publicly claimed to be strictly anti-drug.
Yet court records show Mike Lindbergh had a 1969 drug conviction.
So it begs the question, were they manufacturing substances? Was Joyce caught in the crossfire of a clandestine drug operation where Mark was the protected informant and Mike was the manufacturer?
The mechanics of her situation made her a massive liability to multiple people. So the meditation group presents a highly viable theory of external threat.
But
investigative logic dictates that if a suspect pool protected by informant status yields a dead end, you look closer to the victim's immediate environment.
right.
If the threat wasn't the group she was running toward, We are forced to analyze the person she was actively running away from.
Okay, yes. We have to move from the systemic secrets of the meditation group to the domestic secrets inside her own apartment.
We need to talk about Bruce Beerbaum.
This is the roommate Joyce was so terrified of that she was secretly sleeping on the floor of Stevens Hall, a dorm she didn't even live in, just to avoid being in the same room as him.
When investigators finally executed a search of the apartment she shared with Bruce, they encountered physical anomalies that completely dismantled the theory that Joyce voluntarily walked away from her life.
Yeah, her close friend Jan visited the apartment and discovered Joyce's distinctive blue vase shattered into pieces on top of the refrigerator.
And when Jan confronted Bruce about the broken glass, he casually dismissed it. He claimed it broke during an argument, but he adamantly refused to provide any details about the conflict.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Shattered glass following an argument with a volatile roommate is a massive behavioral red flag.
It indicates physical escalation.
And investigators then discover an even more damning piece of evidence sitting right there in plain sight. Joyce's car keys were inside the apartment.
Leaving the keys behind destroys the logic of a voluntary disappearance, or even an abduction that occurred while she was out running errands.
It places her, or at least her belongings, inside that apartment at the time of the event.
And this physical evidence directly challenges Bruce's timeline, which is a classic investigative trap.
Oh, totally. During his initial interview, Bruce definitively stated he woke up early on Friday morning, July 23rd, and saw Joyce sound asleep on the couch when he left for work at 7 a.m.
But then the police interview Joyce's friend, Patty.
Right, and Patty provides a rock-solid alibi. She confirms she dropped Joyce off at the apartment on Thursday night at 10 p.m.
And Patty told investigators that Joyce explicitly stated she was not going back to Stevens Hall that night because it was too dark to walk. She planned to sleep at the apartment.
So when Bruce realized the police were tightening the timeline around Thursday night, his memory magically altered.
A changing alibi in a homicide investigation is one of the most reliable behavioral indicators of deception.
Because it's hard to keep your lies straight.
Exactly. Maintaining a fabricated timeline requires immense cognitive effort, whereas recalling the truth is automatic.
So when the detective pointed out the discrepancy, Bruce suddenly developed amnesia regarding his Friday morning sighting. He shifted his story to claim the absolute last time he saw her was actually Thursday evening.
And just weeks into the investigation, while Joyce is still officially classified as a missing person, Bruce sends an astonishingly tone-deaf letter to Joyce's grieving father.
Reading this transcript, it lacks any trace of empathy. Instead of expressing hope for her safe return, Bruce uses the letter to demand $90 from her father to cover her share of unpaid rent and phone bills.
He even refers to Joyce exclusively in the past tense.
And most disturbingly, he casually notes that he has already packed up all of her personal belongings and shoved them in a closet, demanding her father come retrieve them because Bruce was moving out.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Bruce's complete lack of empathy and volatile behavior in 1971 was not an isolated incident. It established the baseline for a lifelong pattern of escalation.
Wow, really?
Yes. Criminology shows us that domestic abusers rarely de-escalate without intervention. Public records reveal that since the 1970s, Bruce has been married and divorced 5 or 6 times.
Oh my God.
And over the decades, multiple ex-wives have contacted the sheriff's office to explicitly accuse him of Joyce's murder.
And it goes beyond mere accusations. We found court documents from 2014 where he was charged with domestic battery against his then-wife, who was 40 years younger than him.
She was hiding in a friend's house, right?
Yeah, he tracked her location, physically pinned her against a wall, and stole her purse. We also pulled his professional records. Bruce actually became a veterinarian.
But in 2003, his veterinary license faced severe disciplinary action by the state board.
Because his ex-wife provided evidence that he was regularly administering animal medications to his own human children.
So we are looking at a man with a heavily documented history of domestic violence, a willingness to illegally chemically restrain his own family, and a documented history of altering his alibi regarding a roommate who was terrified of him.
I mean, if Joyce supposedly wandered off or was abducted by a random stranger on the street, there is no logical universe where her car keys remain inside the apartment she shared with the man she was actively trying to escape.
You are entirely correct. Victims fleeing an immediate threat do not leave their primary means of transportation on the kitchen counter.
No, they take the keys and run.
Exactly. But while modern investigators have heavily focused on Bruce, the archival case files force us to confront a third man in Joyce's orbit.
Right.
This individual displayed a level of psychological obsession that simply cannot be ignored.
We have to look at Steve Sully. Steve was the director of a university communications class where Joyce frequently acted in student television commercials.
Joyce documented her fear of him in her letters, too, explicitly describing him as unstable and always moody.
Even Bruce, the volatile roommate, told investigators that Steve had aggressively confronted Joyce, telling her to her face that she was, quote, the source of all his troubles.
Stating that another person is the singular source of your life's troubles indicates a severe psychological fixation. He was projecting his internal instability onto her.
And this intense obsession aligns perfectly with a critical tip from a campus witness who observed Joyce on July 19th, just days before she vanished.
Right. The tipster reported Joyce was in a state of high distress.
Yeah, she had just finished a tense conversation with Steve Sully. Joyce told the tipster she had received a letter from a man she did not trust who was coming to visit her, and she was terrified.
But you have to wonder if she was utilizing a visiting man as a desperate cover story, because she was actually terrified of Steve, who was standing in her immediate vicinity.
Using a fictional threat to escape a real one.
Exactly. It's a common self-preservation tactic. And Steve's behavior following her disappearance is highly indicative of consciousness of guilt.
Because in August, at the height of the police search, Steve walked into the police precinct and handed over Joyce's personal typewriter.
He claimed he was holding it for safekeeping.
Psychologically, inserting yourself into an ongoing investigation by delivering the victim's property is often a manifestation of guilt or a desire to control the narrative.
And shortly after this, right in the middle of the fall semester, he abruptly dropped out of the university and relocated across the country to New York.
Flight is one of the most primal responses to an overwhelming threat of exposure.
It really is.
So what does this all mean? We have 3 incredibly viable suspects, each with a terrifying behavioral profile, but I have to challenge this narrative based on the physical crime scene.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's look back at this FBI report regarding the missing green carpet from Stevens Hall. The FBI anthropologists analyzed Joyce's remains when they were finally discovered in a remote canyon.
Right.
And their official report claims her bones showed distinct puncture marks. They categorize this as evidence of a brutal knife attack. But if she was stabbed forcefully enough to puncture bone, where is the blood?
That's the glaring question.
The remaining carpet in that dorm and the floorboards underneath the stolen square were practically pristine.
What's fascinating here is how modern forensic analysis completely dismantles that 1971 assumption.
Really? How so?
The current consensus from the sheriff's office is that those puncture marks on the bones were not stab wounds at all.
Wait, what were they?
They are highly consistent with animal scavenging activity in the canyon during the months her remains were exposed to the elements.
Oh, wow. That completely rewrites the forensic reality of the crime scene.
It changes everything. If a knife wasn't a weapon, it perfectly explains the total absence of blood in Stevens Hall. It suggests she was killed using a method that leaves no physical trace on a carpet.
So if we apply this new forensic reality to our first suspect, Mark Wadley, and the secret letter...
The institutionalization for strangulation.
Precisely. Strangulation is a silent, intimate method of murder that leaves no blood pool.
Exactly. And the only physical evidence recovered with her remains was a pair of violently slashed underwear, which, despite advanced modern testing protocols, has yet to yield any actionable DNA profile.
So we are left staring at a staggering web of archival evidence. We have a meditation group hiding a history of narcotics and a roommate with a strangulation record.
We have Bruce Beerbaum, the violent domestic abuser with a shattered vase and a fabricated timeline.
And Steve Sully, the obsessive director who inserted himself into the investigation before fleeing the state entirely.
In an era where we are constantly overwhelmed by information overload, this deep dive proves that the truth is often hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, the answers are buried in the discarded fragments of a life. A shattered blue vase swept away, the cognitive load recorded in the ink of a polygraph chart, or a frantic, nearly illegible letter tucked away in a purse.
When the physical evidence was compromised, the psychology of these suspects preserved the story.
And the final chapter of that story hasn't been written. Joyce's brother refuses to let these files gather dust. He is currently offering a $100,000 reward.
That's $60,000 for information leading to an arrest and an additional $40,000 for a conviction.
He firmly believes someone out there holds the final fragment of this puzzle.
Because cold cases of this magnitude do not get solved by continued silence. They are resolved when someone finally realizes that carrying a secret for 55 years is a burden they no longer need to bear.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final haunting detail hidden deep within these case files, an anomaly we haven't even touched on yet.
The phone records, right.
Yeah. During the initial days of the investigation, detectives pulled the toll records for the phone inside Joyce's apartment. They discovered an unexplained long-distance call placed on July 15th to a specific number in Moses Lake, Washington.
And when detectives dialed it, the woman who answered adamantly claimed she had no idea who Joyce LePage or Bruce Beerbaum were.
Today, that number leads to a deadline. No one has ever identified who placed that call or who was truly on the other end.
It's just entirely unresolved.
Furthermore, the campus police officer who initially tried to steer the entire homicide investigation away from these suspects and toward a random tile setter working near the dorm.
Yeah, what about him?
Archival records show that same campus cop was the primary suspect in a major campus molestation case just months prior.
Wait, really?
Yes, and immediately after Joyce vanished, he abruptly resigned from the police force.
Wow. That is just another incredibly dark layer to all of this.
It really is. It raises an important question, one that echoes through every page of these documents. In a case defined by so many shadows, in a town actively burying its secrets, who else was hiding in the dark?